Right, we have a bit of time for a short kind of panel discussion, and then we'll open it up to you guys. I know one thing that always comes up when you kind of get to a certain size is people always go, how much, you have such great marketing and everyone's aware of the brand. How do you know what to allocate for marketing? I mean, where do you start? How do you know? When do you know it's working? You're laughing.
You don't. Well, I mean, everyone always says you know half of it's working, but you don't know which half is the kind of truism about it. I mean, we used to spend virtually nothing, and as a matter of fact, we had a couple of years ago we had David Hyatt who started Howie's Clothing down, and he came down to talk to our marketing team, and he says if you want them to do anything interesting and creative, don't give them any money. And they were all kind of a bit taken back because he was their kind of marketing guru, and they were a bit fed up with that actually. But I think there is a lot of truth in it, and you sounds like you've done incredibly well, Pip. We know with absolutely minimal. We have much greater resources now, but I mean still we're a minnow, and in our particular industry we are surrounded by companies, even if they're not much larger than us, they are backed by venture capitalists who have just limitless pockets. All they want is growth. They don't give a damn whether it's profitable. I think we are about the only profitable home delivery food business. I think all the rest of them, from what I gather, are losing money. They don't really seem to care because they just go to the city and get another 12 million, as one of our competitors did quite recently. I mean, which is, that would be 2 years, marketing for our 2 or 3 years, actually. Yeah. So anyway.
Do either of you have any views on knowing what to spend on it or what works?
I mean, I think it is a bit of a test and learn thing. To some extent, you've got to just try a few things, and some things will be great and not cost you very much. Other things will be pretty expensive and not reach that many people. And I think the annoying thing about marketing is like the word ROI, like what's your return on investment? Sometimes there is some things are intangible as well. So some of the like Nike events that we did, we didn't pay for them. Sometimes they actually paid us to do it. And for us, there was no way of tracking, whether that was a really effective use of time and some spend that we put towards it. Some of it is about building a bit of a halo around the brand, which is probably not a hugely sensible thing to say. We should probably be tracking that ROI all the time. So I think marketing is a real art and a science. Some things from a gut feel, you're like, yeah, we've got to be involved in this. This feels really relevant for our brand and our audience. And then, other times you're looking at the analytics of your, social and your Google analytics to work out whether or not your digital campaign effectively works. So I think it's a really varied bag, but you've just got to try and test it, particularly if you are trying to do a bit more performance marketing. Test and learn on smaller levels, and then if it works, then you can kind of amp up the marketing spend. But the first couple of years, I mean, I use our distribution really as marketing more than anything else. We sold into all the kind of cool hip gyms in the first year and all the amazing high-end stores like Whole Foods and Selfridges, and basically made sure that we looked incredible on shelf and tried to spend as little as possible and put our head down as much as possible when anyone started to talk about money. And we still do the same now, really. So, yeah, I think there is something about, you mentioned it earlier, like building distribution. Like it's just, if you're not visible, there's almost no point you spending any money. So forget about it until you've got those stocking points.
I'm thinking also about, you talk about trying things, getting things wrong, trying them again, kind of, developing things. I think there's this idea that some people have this idea that you can't start something until you've got it perfect. Do you have any thoughts on just going for it and just, I don't necessarily mean with marketing, I mean with trying new products and that sort of thing, or an idea, or a new part of the website, or.
I think there's many things. I think you generally, if you have an idea, you've got to go for it. And quite often, all the research in the world is never going to tell you what's actually going to happen until you speak to consumers, and the consumers are going to tell you whether it's right or wrong. But yeah, we've done many things, and we constantly fail. I mean, it's one of our great attributes. We love failing. We don't love failing, but it happens all the time. We launched a product only in December with which I thought was going to be fantastic. It's going to take the world over because we put fennel in it. I thought that was incredible. It's one of my favorite ingredients. I love fennel. Let's put fennel in it. It's going to go really well. And I mean, it's been the most catastrophic disaster of product we've ever launched, and we're now taking it off shelf because it's got too much fennel in it. So you just never know what actually is right. But if you believe in it, you've got to give it a go because you can't test it. I tested it on everyone I knew, and they all said they loved it. So it was totally wrong.
Yeah. Is that the same for you as well?
Yeah, everyone says they love my cardoons whenever I cook them, which are the most bitter and tough vegetable you could possibly buy. And then when I put them on the website and try and sell them, no one buys them. Or occasionally they send them back if they do. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, believing in yourself and timing is incredibly important. I mean, you can try something at one time and it doesn't work, and another time, I mean, all our customers tell us that they want all UK vegetables, and we tried a UK vegetable box over and over again, and it never got beyond 1% of sales, actually. But just actually now, we're up to 3%, and it's climbing. So it's, it is partly timing. I don't think we've got any better at doing it. I just think people weren't ready for it.
Thinking about sourcing, you guys obviously work closely with different producers, nuts, fruits, cereals, and that kind of thing. How do you decide who is the right person, who's responsible, or who's trustworthy, reliable, that kind of thing? And who, in terms of getting a consistent, reliable supply chain, how do you work out who to work with?
Yeah, so from a supply chain perspective, I mean, I mentioned it when I was speaking. Like, it really is about finding the right partner, and I think particularly when you're outsourcing your production to a manufacturer who's going to make your product, there's a huge amount of trust involved in that, in making sure that they do it the way that you want it to be done, and that they have an open and transparent conversation with you. And I think, there are pluses and minuses to making a product with a co-manufacturer, manufacturer, and I think that's why, particularly in that early stages, you're looking at who to work with. Are they good people? And I think you can really suss that out from a really early stage conversation, whether or not you get good feelings about this, company that you're going to work with, the MDs of the factory. And I certainly remember meeting lots of different factories when I was searching for someone. And, there were some which you just would never want to work with. And I think trust your gut on some of that stuff. But then, and the great thing about working with some brilliant factories is that they bring loads of expertise in. So we work with 2 factories now. They're really experienced. We work with one that's just for our almond butters, and then another factory just for our peanut butters. And all those factories do is handle peanuts, and they have real expertise, and they buy directly from farmers out in Argentina, and they work collaboratively with them. And it's that expertise that actually, for us, it was really important that we had some degree of scale with our kind of purchasing, and actually, because we are so small in context of, say, the California crop of almonds, which is just ginormous, we actually need to be able to work with some of our factories in order to kind of buy direct, because otherwise, annoyingly, they often turn you away and say you're too small to even work directly. So actually, by working through some of our partners, we've been able to get better connections to our raw materials. But I think supply chain is an ever-evolving beast, and over time you get to go deeper and deeper into it. And I kind of look forward to the stage where you're at, where you get to really, own your own site, which is amazing, but also start to really go deep into every aspect of it. And I think that's, part of the course of and journey of starting up a business, really.
I think that trusting your gut is really important. It's so contrast with, when we supplied Sainsbury's and Waitrose, we were forever being audited, and it's just a tick box exercise. Yeah. Relationships have nothing to do with it. I mean, with our suppliers, they have to be organic. We won't buy it if it's been in an aeroplane, and we won't buy it if it's been out of heated glass. Beyond that, we did actually, our technical manager suggested coming up with having an auditing procedure, and I'm afraid that was the most recent time that I lost my temper in a board meeting, actually. Because it just really reminded me of what I'd been subjected to by some uppity supermarket guy who, and I just thought, we're not doing that. So we visit them all, we invite them to come and visit us, we have a conference, which is really a big party every year when they come to the farm, and they are, most of them, we've been working with for years, and they are, my friends. And that's, do you get a good feeling when you meet them? Particularly, I have to say, with some prejudice perhaps, in Southern Europe, some of the organic certification occasionally leaves something to be desired. And it is important that you do feel confident in those suppliers. And I think the other things that we're looking at, we are looking for people who've got a bit of mud on their boots, or, that actually do get involved with it. They're not just the sort of bean counters, and we very rarely buy through wholesalers, or even cooperatives. Actually, we want to buy directly from the grower, and it's been built. Those relationships have been built over a long, long time.
How does it work for you? How do you decide, or have you had to? Has there ever been a point where you have sort of thought that one isn't working for whatever reason? We need to find a new one.
I mean, I think in our business we work in commodities, and a lot of we go as close as we possibly can to as many farmers as we can. So we work together for all of our core ingredients. Yes, we work together with the farmers or the growers in any of the countries that we need to work with to make sure that they're growing them to the standards that we want. There's no artificial anything, or there's no preservatives. There's nothing in there that shouldn't be in there, and everything's treated with respect. I never forget a great saying from a very nice guy who I met many years back, who was our macadamia supplier, and he was in South Africa, and the crop of macadamias you get in South Africa is very small. So, in actual fact, it's not necessarily about us choosing the supplier; it's about the supplier choosing you. And you've got to also be mindful that we don't want to be arrogant just because we're paying the money. It doesn't mean to say that you're the ones who are in charge. So he actually said, if you want to be buying a good crop of macadamias, it's the person who's had the last beer with the farmer who's going to get that contract. So you also have to be present, and I think that's what's important. You have to build relationships on a partnership basis. It's not about sort of saying, look, I'm paying you money and can you give it to me for 10 pence cheaper or whatever it's going to be. It's not about that. It's about making sure you develop a great relationship with customers, obviously, but also with suppliers across the whole range.
And then the final thing is, and then we'll open up to questions, thinking about staff, got a whole range of different numbers of people who work for you. How do you keep them? I know what you're doing at the moment. How do you guys, what were you doing before actually, and was that something you felt was the only way to kind of keep them there, was to engage them that way?
No, it wasn't. Becoming employee owned wasn't to retain the staff, though I certainly hope that it will help. I feel really strongly believed in devolved decision making, giving people as much autonomy about how their day goes and what they're doing and how they do it, giving them the ability to grow and get better at it. So that's mastery, and I think the third sort of real motivator, is purpose, and that's the one that we've always been really good at. I have to say the other two we're getting much better at now, and of course pay really helps. We have just recently, we had a good year last year, and we have increased the wages at the bottom very substantially. And I do, in agriculture, the work is very, very demanding, and I think fewer and fewer people are going to want to do it, and we have to make sure that we keep the best ones.
You're nodding, is that?
Yeah, I think the autonomy piece that you just mentioned is so important, and I think that's why people work for a small business. And it's funny because we do have lots of great initiatives. We do free breakfast for everyone every day, like team lunches, away days, and great, loads of really fun stuff. But when we speak to people or our team about what really motivates them, what really gets them excited to work for the business, is that A, they're working for a brand and a product that they believe in, but B, that they've got they really have ownership of what they're working on. And I think it can be quite difficult when you've got your baby and you're kind of handing out responsibilities and kind of letting go of things, but actually you've got to some extent let go and allow people to make those mistakes and develop themselves. And I think a lot of the people that work in my team get excited by the growth that we're seeing and all that kind of exciting kind of new projects that we're getting involved in within the business. And there's quite a lot of fluidity in terms of roles. So particularly in smaller businesses, people aren't just stuck to their job spec. And I think a lot of people really enjoy that kind of broad view that they get of a business rather than it being very narrow and deep that a lot of businesses might have. So I think perks help keep people to some extent, but ultimately it's like, really, are you listening and helping and supporting them grow? For sure, but I'm still learning for sure.
Great, thanks. So we've got some time for questions, which is your moment to ask anything on growth or marketing or IP or staff or advice, general advice, startup finance, anything. If you don't ask it, no one can help give you an answer. So let's. Do we have a mic? Yeah. If we start down here, that'd be great.
I've got some questions from Twitter, actually.
Oh, start with one of those, yeah.
So
Let's start with one of those.
they're coming in from all over the country. It's been fantastic. So from Hull and Cambridge, you name it, it's been there. So a couple of specific questions just around dealing with retail, supermarkets and retail. One is from Dan Gret. How did you develop your product for retail, involving things like shelf life? And also a question from BIPC Hull. This is very specific, but I think a lot of people will be interested to know. When you first start selling to the supermarkets, did you have a sale or return agreement? And did you market your product together with them or on your own?
I guess either of you guys want to take that?
Well, we don't have a sale or return agreement. No, once it's sold, and we're not taking it back. What we do have to make sure, however, of course, is that once it goes on the shelf, it's going to sell once it gets on the shelf. So we have to work together with the customer to make sure that that's going to happen. So no, there's no supply or return. It's fairly straightforward. Sale's a sale. And the other question I think you were asking was about the how do you get the product ready? You have to make sure it's food safe. I think there's some fairly clear, simple things you need to make sure it's food safe. You've done all of your tests, and there's loads of other advice that probably I don't think I'm the right person to give, but you have to get the right technical advice to make sure your product is safe and it does meet the standards as necessary.
Great. Should we have another one from there, and then I can go back to the audience?
Sure, yeah. A question perhaps for Pip is, how do you find the right influences for your business?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's evolved over time. So sort of in the early days when I sort of, manned our Instagram feed and things like that, you kind of get to know it pretty well. And I think it's a bit like in the same way that you build your network in real time. So you kind of evolves over time and you start to kind of know who's the people to watch. And I think the interesting thing about influencers, though, it's not always necessarily about working with those that have the biggest following. We do a lot of work with sort of micro-influencers, and they're sort of like the 5,000 to 10,000 followers. And we really like engaging with them more sometimes than some of the bigger guys who expect, a bit of a paycheck to kind of post about something, is that often they have a more highly engaged audience anyway on their social feeds, and they'll also grow with you, and therefore, you'll have a little bit more of a connection with them, and hopefully over time as their following grows, they don't charge you, and you can work on a more of a collaborative basis. But yeah, I mean, I think influencer marketing sometimes can feel a bit fluffy, but I think there's something so brilliant about that word of mouth marketing and that about somebody else recommending your product. But we don't pay for any influencer marketing, so we send out huge amounts of kind of amazing, beautiful parcels to our partners that we work with, and we hope that they post about it. And I think it's about making sure that you really make sure that you're giving something that's distinctive and something that they want. So when you are working with them, make sure there is genuinely a want for your product. Don't just blanket send it out. Often we'll reach out to people that may have already bought our product in the past and say, hey, I've got a new thing coming out, and do you want to try it? And we'll send it to them that way. But yeah, and we like to keep it in-house as well. We much prefer to build our network in-house and build those relationships, because again, if you do it through a PR agency, then people tend to think that you've got more money to spend than what you actually do. So try and rein that in a little bit. But yeah, it just builds, and we have a huge long Excel database now that we just keep adding to, and it evolves over time.
I think you had a question at the front. Do we have a mic? Do you have a mic? We'll go there and then there.
Sure. This is a question for Guy. When you started, you said you were the third box supplier. So how was your thinking around saying, I'm one of the next to market, and am I thinking in terms of market share, or what drove your thinking?
Okay, so we were selling to supermarkets and wholesalers, and I found myself, I was rapidly going towards being a commodity producer. The supermarkets were persuading their large growers to convert to organic, and I could see before long I was going to be in the same position that my dad had been, selling milk just white stuff that went away in a tanker, and he was a price taker, not a price maker. I was growing vegetables on 1 in 4 slopes in Devon, and there was clearly no hope of me competing with someone much closer to the pack houses and distribution. I had to do something else, and I met this couple who, one of the lovely things about the organic industry is how open people generally are to sort of sharing and encouraging each other. And they said that we're just doing this kind of community-supported agriculture box scheme thing, and it's going really well. And they told me what it was. Of course, I didn't have a clue. That was back in '93. And I thought it sounded insane. You know, I mean, the supermarkets were stocking ever greater numbers of items, and the home, milkman was going out. The bread delivery had already gone. The fish delivery was going. But somehow they persuaded me to give it a go. And the first time I walked up the garden path and handed the box over and met the customers and saw their excitement about, what the vegetables tasted like and who grew them, as opposed to just, what they looked like and what the price was, I knew I was onto something. So that was kind of, it was just following someone else's very generous help, really. And it just grew steadily from there, really. We didn't invest anything in marketing at all, actually. The short of photocopying about 200 leaflets, I think, at the beginning. And that was it for the first, 5 years or so. Yeah.
Great. If we go next to you, and then I'll go out up here.
Question, really. When you first launched your product at Selfridges, that's quite a company to kind of get in there first as your first retailer. How did you kind of win them over to kind of, and then lever off that for other stockists?
Yeah, it's a good question. I remember actually a couple of buyers reached out. One reached out when I was doing our crowdfunding campaign and said, I'd like the sound of your products, we'd like to have a meeting. And I'd also done a sort of separate side event. I was sort of doing a kind of startup school thing, and I was, again, sampling the product. This was pre-launch, and one of the buyers happened to come by and taste the product. It was very near Selfridges when I was doing that sort of market stall event. And again, sort of said, love to have a conversation with you. The great thing about Selfridges, though, is that regardless of if you have that fortuitous meeting or not, they are very open to working with younger brands and actually also helping work with you to evolve your proposition as well. I think you can probably ask anyone in food and drink, do you know a Selfridges bar, and get an email address off them and send them an email, send them some products, and it might take some time for them to get back to you. But generally speaking, if it's a relatively trendy, on-trend product, they'll probably have a meeting with you at least. So I think it isn't easy, but it isn't also as hard as you might think. If anything, they're also out and looking for kind of up-and-coming brands that aren't stocked in major supermarkets. So you've got something to kind of leverage there. But I think that comes back to why it's important to start to get your product out as soon as possible.
Sorry, I didn't say that. There's a second part. Do you think they bought into you or the product?
Definitely the product, but I think there's also an element of how you sell it in. If you've got that passion, I think that definitely gets them excited. So yeah, they're buying into the product and the brand, the potential for sure, because that's what's going to sit on shelf. But they're also buying into whether or not you're going to do 100 samplings in the first, 2 months, and whether or not you think they're going to really push it. So yeah, I think they come hand in hand to some extent. But, yeah.
Has anyone on this side got a burning question? Or would you like to, Sarah, Mike? Yeah.
Hi, I've got a question for Pip, and it's about working with a manufacturer. Mm-hmm. So in the beginning, did you seek any legal advice in terms of making sure that your recipe was protected?
Yeah.
Did they sign an NDA, or what was the process that you went through?
Yeah, it's so tough at the first time you're trying to get a contract or agreement in place with a manufacturer. And the thing that I found, and sometimes even still find, is that they don't really want to work with you. You're difficult, low volume. They'd much rather work with a Tesco own label brand and just churn it through the factory. So trying to persuade them to do anything out of nature is kind of quite difficult, which comes down to that point around get to know the people and really sell your brand into into them because they're buying into like whether they can have a bit of a fun journey along the way with you as a person and the potential for the brand in the future. Having said that, as much as possible, we try and get people to sign an NDA, but the funny thing about NDAs is that ultimately, I didn't have any budget to sue them anyway, even if they did tell anyone, which is a bit annoying, really. But I think it just sets a precedent, and I think it's a good thing to try and do. But ultimately, it comes down to trust anyway. Our product is made of 2 ingredients, so it's not difficult to adapt it a little bit and say it's something different. But I do think, and actually for the first couple of years we didn't have a contract in place, which I'm not saying is necessarily what you should do. It's just that our factory wouldn't sign one with us. They didn't want to pay the legal fees for it. But we did try as much as possible to get some, protection for our brand as possible. So I'm giving you a bit of a sitting on the fence answer, which is that if you can try and get people to sign up to a contract in their early days, I think do that as much as possible. But there's also a bit of a relationship piece that you've got to build as well and prove yourself and warrant them spending the money on the legal fees to adapt that contract. And particularly when you're developing the product in the factory, be all over it. Absolutely ask every single question you possibly can about what they're doing. Make sure you make notes, much notes about what's happening, so that you really understand exactly what's going on. So there's never a question that you can't ask. I think when you're inside the factory and they're talking and working with you to develop the products in their factory, because you want to kind of also retain as much IP, because you might know the recipe, but you might not have all the information about exactly how they're processing it. And that's what you need to try and make sure you have exact clarity on what they're doing. And then over time, we've now got contracts and all that in place. So I think it's so dependent on each site. Try as much as possible, but also don't be too hard on yourself if you haven't managed to lock it down, although try and do it as soon as you possibly can. Yeah.
Any more from up the top at all? There's one over here. Sorry, I'm going to make you run now. Actually, yeah, we could go low first. Should we go low first and then get a mic up the top? Yeah, maybe to this guy here first, and then
I'll try and speak loudly.
And then a mic up the top. Yeah.
This is a question for Guy, really. I'm launching an ethical food marketplace next Tuesday. I'm launching an ethical food marketplace next Tuesday, which enables farmers to sell directly. I'd say my Achilles heel is maintaining high quality. Do you have any advice before my launch on Tuesday about how it's happening and I can't stop it so long as Royal Mail has something to do with that. But do you have any advice? I think I've chosen carefully. I'm working, I hope, closely with them, but how can I help them to maintain high quality, to help them make the most of getting 90p in the pound?
I'm assuming this is an online thing, yeah. Well, I mean, visit them and see what they produce and get a feeling to whether they care about it or not, I guess, is a pretty good starting place. I mean, in fresh produce, it is virtually impossible to quantify quality. So you just have to be someone that cares about it, and that I suppose that they understand that their self-interest is to be selling something that's good, and that people are going to come back and want to buy again. I mean, check that we do it our way. Just check that they do understand and do it. That they're not. I mean, we've worked with quite a few people who have been, well, I wouldn't do it again now, but people who have not been the doers. They've been the clever guys, the business guys, the money guys and whatever, and their product's always crap. You've got to have someone who really cares about the product. So I hope that answers it a bit. Very difficult to really to measure quality in something which is flavour and freshness and so on is really hard to do. Yeah.
If we go up here and then we'll go maybe back to one online as well.
Hi, sorry. So you all spoke about the ethical sides of your business, and I was wondering, especially when you're working with global commodities, have you ever had situations where the customer's driven you to do something that you realise when you go down the supply chain you're not comfortable with? Or has there ever been an MPD trying to drive you to something and then you found yourself maybe not getting the market share in something because your ethical side of it has kind of pulled you back a little bit?
Praveen, do you have anything to say on that?
I mean, I can't remember a specific case where that has actually happened, because we generally, although we're customer-led, we generally have made a product that has firstly passed all of our basic ethical requirements. So, no, I don't think that would happen. But if it did happen to us, then I think I would like to think that we would put our principles first. That may not always be the case. So I'd like to think that it is, but it's a very privileged position that I speak in at the moment. Because if I go back 20 years, and if we were forced, to make a decision, then, we may have compromised. I can't say, but because you also want to make sure that your business is profitable, or you're trying to do what you have to do. So it's very easy to sit here now and say, we'll put our ethics first. But today I could do that now. But we may not have had to be able to do that to start off with.
Where are we at from the libraries?
Oh, right. So I've got a great question here from BIPC Leeds, who are watching this evening. What has been the most rewarding moment for each of you in your own business?
Anyone? What about you guys?
For me, it was the day we became employee-owned, when I probably had rather too much to drink, but I stepped out and I looked out across the valley over the reservoirs where I taught my kids to swim, and I thought, my God, it's not mine anymore, and it's not mine. It's mine to share with everyone else, but I can't tell them to get the hell off my land anymore if I don't, because it's not my land anymore. And I looked round, and there were 3 or 4 other people there, equally inebriated, looking out over the valley. And I realised they were the owners, these people who had never had land before, and it just felt so wonderful. And, a year later, I do feel very proud and happy to be sharing it with them. You don't have to own it to enjoy it, so, yeah.
How about you? What's the most rewarding?
Oh, that was amazing, isn't it? I feel like a bit shallow. This is now what I'm going to say.
We've won tons of awards. But they've been highs.
Yeah, I mean, seeing it on supermarket shelves the first time, it is unbelievable. Like, it's just an amazing feeling, because you obviously spent 3 years trying to get it there, and so I think it's whenever those moments where you've really grafted for a long amount of time and it's suddenly paid off. But you know what? There are smaller highs that we've had along the way. I love seeing the events that we do. Like, we do Taste of London every year, and every year I just love I get such a buzz if I'm standing on the stand sampling and whatever, and you just hear someone walk past going, "Oh, I love pip&nut," and that for me, and it's not even prompted. It's just like, "Oh, yes, winning." So yeah, I try and get out as much as possible, just to get that for me, because it gives me such a kick. Yeah.
What about a neat natural reward?
I don't think anyone's going to be able to compete with guys. Yeah, it's very ridiculous. But yeah, I suppose one of the highlights for me, certainly over the last year, has been that we received our first crop of honey from some of our beehives, and it's been amazing to actually taste that. Yeah. Something that normally other people grow products for us, but this is the first time that we've actually made something. We made the beehive. We found the bees, the bees went to the beehive, and they made, they've been foraging on this particular crop is actually coming from lime leaves and black currants, blackberries, and it was an unbelievable feeling to be able to think that we've actually created something and made something that has come from nature and it tastes fabulous too. So yeah, it's been a highlight over the last year.
Brilliant. We've probably got time for 2 more. One up here, and then.
My question is on the personal motivation. So I guess everyone who has an idea would always question, if this is a good idea or not. So how do you keep yourself personally motivated, and how do you, there are bad days, but how do you, make sure that you're not just doing a stupid idea and you should just let go, I guess.
So kind of how do you stay relevant, kind of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a big question.
How do I stay motivated? Well, I think try and do the stuff that I actually enjoy. I mean, I can't tell you the amount of times where I found myself working on something and I'm just so boring and just so dry. It could be I don't know, fixing our IT systems, literally the worst thing ever. And just realising, you know, in order to keep the energy in myself and keep myself excited to come to work, you know, really find the things that you're actually good at, and then try and hand off the rest to people that can do it better than you. So I think that for me keeps me motivated, and I think speaking to customers as much as possible. I think, you know, we're all consumer-facing brands. You know, the more you can get out into stores or you know, in front of people and actually hear people what they're saying, whether it's good or bad, I think is incredibly motivating, because it's then that you actually realise the impact that you're having. I find it kind of sometimes a bit abstract when you just look at sales data and you see, oh, we sold this many thousand units today and that's Sainsbury's stores, whatever. It sort of doesn't feel very tangible, and it's only really when you're, you know, in the thick of it do you really get that like kick of like, oh, okay, we're actually building something here. So yeah, those are probably my two things.
Any moments of no motivation which you've found a way of getting out of?
I mean, for me, I mean, meetings and the kind of business side of it just completely kills it for me. And you know, I can't bear sitting in meetings, and I have to limit the amount of time that I do it. And, you know, to the extent that, you know, often I'm not there at times when perhaps I should be. But if you're there and you fall asleep, or you just started picking an argument to keep yourself awake, it's not very productive, really, and not very encouraging for everyone else. So I still believe that there are far too many meetings. You know, not everyone's like me, I know, but I really think the amount of time spent in businesses in meetings is absurd. But yeah.
What about you? More meetings, fewer meetings?
I think that you generally have to know that the idea that you're working on is worthwhile, and that comes from your own understanding, and you've got to have your own vision of what you're trying to do in your business and in your life generally. And I think then you are automatically going to be rewarded. But I mean, I'm personally a highly motivated person anyway. I just generally love what I do, and but that doesn't come from seeing results or anything. I generally do love what I do. And that you either do love what you do or you don't. So if you've got any self-doubt, then don't do it.
Or work on your confidence. One more question probably, and then we'll...
There was a second part to that question, which I think was about self-doubt, wasn't there? You said something about asking, if someone asked you, I don't know, is it a stupid idea or something?
Yeah.
I think having people around you who ask good questions and don't take easy answers and will tell you when you're being a prat, or, you know, it's not, or sometimes, you know, there are a few times when I have been told that, you know, what I'm doing is just wrong, actually, and sometimes I can go away and justify what I'm doing, and a few times I haven't been able to, actually. So having people who can ask those questions and surrounding you with people who perhaps complement your skills, I think is really important, without dragging you down.
Thanks a lot. Very useful.
One more question. Yeah, sure, go for it. If you've got a mic here. Yeah, I'm just getting a mic. Yeah, just here. Yes, yeah, go for it.
Hi, my question's for Pip. It's about your experience about selling in the markets, and how different do you think your journey would have been had you not started off that way?
Oh God, I'd still do it the same way again if I could do it again. I definitely still would start at a market stall. I mean, I think that it is important to start small. Whether that's at a market stall, it doesn't necessarily have to be. You could, you know, try and get friends of friends to kind of try the product. I think if you've got a food product, though, you've got to get people with neutral opinions or unbiased opinions trying it, so that you can at least test it and hear some feedback as early as you possibly can. So this whole idea of, like, you know, hiding your idea because someone might steal it, I think is absolute rubbish. You know, you can be the third to market and then smash it. So, you know, it's just really how you execute it, really. I think that counts more than anything else. But I think you've just got to test it, and I think I just found it a really effective way to do it, because you're basically standing on a stand and you don't have to pay any consumer groups to tell you spend 20 grand to do a consumer panel. You can do it for free and get paid to do it at the same time. So, and actually, I just loved it. It was really fun. I mean, it was you know, making it yourself, like, getting out, you had all the other market stall holders. So it was really fun. Like, it's so, like, you know, low risk, and it was brilliant. So if anything else, it's a part of the journey that I enjoyed, and went on to do different things after that. So yeah, I think it's important, but you know, you can do it in different ways. Essentially, it's not necessary.
Great, cool, thank you. We could keep going, but I don't think we've run out of time. So there will be time now after this to have some drinks and ask some questions. Probably everyone's going to be mobbed, but anyway, do go for it, and if they've got time, they'll answer your questions. And otherwise, thank you for coming to everyone here, and obviously online, and all the different forums there and the other libraries. And to Philippa, I don't know if she's still here. Yeah, you're there doing your presentation. Yeah, all the questions, all the libraries, and all of you in the audience, thank you. I hope you'll all go away feeling really inspired. And make sure I've started feedback forms so you can get one of the prizes at the end. The prize will be announced later, so if you stay and you do your feedback form, you get both. And that's it, so thank you very much for coming.